nice humans. I've got a little junk journal video to share with you today. This one is a response to the very first prompt in Junk Journal July for 2023. The prompt is good vibes, which I thought was fun. I'm not going to be making a video for every prompt, but I will be sharing some as the month goes on. I worked on my Junk Journal January journal for some time after January was over. I don't necessarily keep up with the pace that everyone else is doing it at. I just find that I tend to work at a slower pace, and I'd rather really enjoy it than do the thing that I do, which is feel like a failure if I set my goals and expectations of myself too high. So some people need that push. For me, it's enough to make me stop altogether. And when I bring my focus back to the fact that I want to do this in order to create and be inspired and encouraged by the work of others, staying in it, I have to sort of change the parameters for myself. So that's my long way of saying you won't be getting a video from me every day or even every second day, but I am going to share some of them, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the work of those of you who are joining in as well. So let's actually get into it, shall we? This is a page that I've chosen in my journal. It's actually a little pocket which I created using an envelope. So if I was going to do an artwork like this, just not in a journal, I wouldn't use a pocket to do it. There are a couple of things I sort of have to work around, which you'll see as we go along, due to the fact that it is this sort of shape. But this is what I wanted to do, so I went with it. But yeah, it's a little bit of a fiddly process at times, which you'll see. So I've got a bit of it's like a self-healing cutting mat, and it's just a small piece of one, which I've chopped off another one to for situations like this, to get into small spaces. And I've tucked it inside the envelope because I don't want to cut all the way through. I just want to cut one part of it, one side of it. And I'm cutting a little phrase that just says the vibes were immaculate, because, that's a thing we say, right? And when I was thinking about good vibes, I just started thinking about the last time I remember being one of the last times I remember being super present in just experiencing the good vibes and feeling happy and just immersed in a beautiful moment. I don't know if it's the last time, but a recent experience of that, I guess. And that was when my family and I were in Japan, and we visited the gardens in the Imperial Palace. Or around the Imperial Palace. Maybe they have gardens inside. I don't know. We did not see that. But it was the end of cherry blossom season, and there were beautiful cherry blossoms everywhere, and it was just beautiful and magical. And so I was thinking about what it felt like just to be in that place with the people that I love the most in the world. And so I got this photo, which I took of some of the blossoms in that garden, and I've printed it out. I've actually printed it out on glossy sticker paper, which may or may not have been the best choice. I'm not sure. It was just not as thick as actual photo paper, but I wanted that kind of glossy photo effect because I didn't want matte, or just for the sort of slightly faded look you get when it's on just regular printer paper, because it was going to have to show through these smaller little letters, basically the holes that I've cut into the paper. It needed to be able to stand out, and I needed that to be kind of vivid and with that little bit of sort of glossiness to it. I thought that would help it stand out from those smaller cuts in the paper. So that's why I chose that to print it on. That was a long-winded explanation, but hopefully it made sense. So yeah, I tucked it in there and stuck it down, but obviously the little pieces of the paper that are the inside of the curve of the S and the little sections around the E, the tiny little sticky outy bits. Wow, this is really hard to explain, but they lift obviously when they're not stuck down. So this is one of those situations where, again, if I wasn't working in a journal, in an envelope that I had already put in there, I would have done this on a separate piece of paper that I would have then been able to put adhesive on and stick down. But I couldn't do that because it was already in there. So I had to work around it. So I got adhesive, matte medium, and I just put some on the end of a little skewer, and then I sort of dabbed it onto the parts that I wanted to stick down, and that was fine. It was fiddly, but it was actually kind of fun. And then I put some books on top of it so it could dry nice and flat. And now I'm adding some stitching. This is partly to make sure, like to help hold it all in place so the glue isn't doing all the work, and it's partly because I love the contrast of the cream thread on the dark green paper and the texture and all that kind of stuff. So I'm adding that on there as well. So this is not meant to be a pocket. When I made the journal, I thought I might use it as a pocket, but instead I've sort of taken advantage of that pockety sort of configuration, and I have instead created something with layers. So I think we have a prompt coming up later in the challenge that has got to do with layering. So maybe you might like to try something like this, creating layers that you can kind of see through, that create a quote or a phrase or a name or a word or something. That might be a fun way to play with that. There was a bit too much space at the bottom. It felt a little bit lonely and plain. So I grabbed a scrap of fabric, which I love to do. I'm using more and more fabric in my journals. I mean, I've always done it a little bit, but I'm doing it more than ever now. And I just sort of stapled it on there. I wanted to create a little tab that stuck out at the side. And then I got my awl and made some holes in it. And I'm going to use those to stitch. Sometimes you can just stitch through the page by hand, but this was photo paper and 2 layers of reasonably thick envelope paper, and the needle wasn't super sharp. I'm actually using a darning needle here. It may not be the best choice, but it's what I had handy. I did need to sort of pierce the holes in there in advance. And I'm using all 6 strands of the embroidery floss here. I don't normally do that unless I want it to look really chunky, and I definitely did want it to be chunky in this situation. I'll often separate them out and use either 3 or 2 strands, but this time I used all 6. You can see me just adding an extra little hole there because I left one out, and I'm leaving out one of the crosses so it looks a little bit haphazard and not too symmetrical. I want it to look a bit messy there. So it looks like someone was stitching and then they kind of got distracted halfway through. Now this is the point where I decided that it was too plain and I wanted to add some more texture to the thing. So I thought I would try writing on it. And I'm using black on this dark green because I don't want the writing to be the main focus. I want it to sort of blend into the background a little bit, but to still be there to add a bit of visual texture. So I'm sort of describing the flowers that we saw that day and, where we were, I think. And then I'm adding some lines underneath. When I stood back and looked at it, I decided I didn't really like it very much, but I didn't want to scrap the page because that's kind of not what we're doing here. We all make pages that we don't love. And I didn't hate it so much that I was like, oh my God, this can never see the light of day. But I was also like, I wish I hadn't done that. I'm not sure what I would have done instead because it definitely did feel unfinished. And I guess my choice was to just kind of do something rather than nothing. But that sometimes means that you end up doing something that you don't particularly like. So that is kind of what happened here. So to sort of mitigate that, I got a piece of, what is this? It's not vellum. It's sort of vellum-ish paper. It's sort of semi-transparent, semi-opaque paper. And I'm basically just sticking it in with washi tape to create a layer over the top of it. And I am going to get I wanted to say bobby pin. That's not a bobby pin. That's a paper clip. I suppose you could use bobby pins in journals for that same purpose, if that's all you've got lying around. But anyway, I used a paper clip to sort of hold it in place so that every time I open this journal, I don't look at a page that I don't particularly like and feel discouraged, basically. Because when this is over the top of it, you can't see much of the text that I added, but you can still see that there's paper cutting and stitching and stuff underneath. And then you can take the paper clip off and look at it if you want to. So that's a way of kind of getting around a page that you maybe don't love and keeping the vibes, positive, which, you know, on day one is a good thing, right? Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you liked this video. Make sure you look at what everybody else is creating in the Junk Journal July 2023 challenge. I have to remember what month we're in. And yeah, because I'm sure there's going to be heaps of great stuff. I hope you'll join in as well, whether you share or not. Just kind of get involved in the process because it's always fun. And yeah, I'll see you again soon. Bye.